Hey, quick thing before we begin. If you end up loving this story, and trust me, you will, hit that like button. It helps more people discover it. Now, let me tell you about the most emotional wedding in New York history. The cobblestone streets of Brooklyn's historic district glistened under the unforgiving afternoon sun. Among the tourists admiring the Brooklyn Bridge and street vendors hawking their crafts, there was a figure everyone avoided, Mrs. Dorothy. At 58 years old, Dorothy lived in a dark corner near Prospect Park, wrapped in tattered clothes that had once been colorful. Her weathered face, marked by sun and sorrow, told stories no one wanted to hear. In her trembling hands, she always held the same faded photograph, the image of a smiling child she had lost decades ago. Passers-by looked away. Shop owners shooed her from their doorways. To the world, Dorothy was invisible. But there was someone who saw her. Don Robert Castellano wasn't just any man. At 65 years old, he was known throughout New York as the most powerful and feared businessman in the region. Owner of casinos, hotels, and businesses operating in the shadows, Robert had built an empire from nothing. That October afternoon, Robert was driving his black BMW through downtown Brooklyn when he suddenly ordered his driver to stop. "Wait here," he said firmly, stepping out of the vehicle under the astonished gaze of his bodyguards. He walked straight toward the homeless woman begging on the corner. Dorothy looked up, frightened, preparing to be chased away again. But what she saw paralyzed her. The powerful man before her had tears in his eyes. "Mrs. Dorothy?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Is it you?" "Dorothy Williams." The old woman looked at him confused, her clouded eyes trying to focus on the stranger's face. "Who's asking?" she responded in a weak voice. Robert fell to his knees before her, not caring about dirtying his $5,000 suit. "It's me, little Bobby, the boy you saved 50 years ago. 50 years ago." Dorothy was a young single mother of 28 working as a laundress in the wealthy homes of Manhattan. She lived humbly but had a heart as big as the sky. One rainy December afternoon, she found an 8-year-old boy shivering under a bridge. It was Robert, the son of alcoholics who had abandoned him. He was malnourished, sick, and alone. Dorothy, who barely had enough to feed herself, took the boy and brought him to her humble apartment. For 3 years, she fed him, clothed him, taught him to read, and gave him the only maternal love Robert would ever know in his childhood. When Robert was 11, his maternal uncle found him and took him to live in Chicago. Dorothy cried for days, but was happy that the boy would have a chance to study and prosper. She never saw him again. Back in the present, Robert helped Dorothy to her feet as curious onlookers began to gather around them. "For 50 years I've been looking for you, Mrs. Dorothy," said Robert, his voice breaking. "I changed my last name when my uncle adopted me. I lost track of this area. But I never forgot what you did for me." Dorothy began to remember. Her eyes widened. "Little Bobby? The boy from the bridge?" "Yes, it's me," Robert smiled through tears. "And I've come to repay you for what I can never finish repaying." The bodyguards watched the scene without understanding. The most dangerous man in New York was crying in the middle of the street, embracing a homeless woman. "This Saturday, my eldest son, Alexander, is getting married," Robert explained. "The wedding will be at my estate in the Hamptons. And you, Mrs. Dorothy, will be my guest of honor." Dorothy couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But, sir, I have nothing to wear. "Mrs. Dorothy," Robert interrupted with a smile, "you don't worry about anything. Absolutely nothing." The following days were a whirlwind for Dorothy. Robert installed her in a suite at New York's most luxurious hotel. He assigned private doctors to treat her health problems. He hired stylists, makeup artists, and fashion designers. "I want you to feel like the queen you always were to me," Robert told her. Friday night, Dorothy looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back. Her silver hair had been cut and styled elegantly. Her face, clean and subtly made up, radiated a dignity that years on the street hadn't been able to take away. The dress Robert had commissioned was a work of art, wine red, with golden embroidery that respected traditional American elegance with modern sophistication. For the first time in decades, Dorothy felt human again. She cried, but this time from happiness. Saturday arrived with a perfect blue sky over the Hampton estate. Robert's property was a restored colonial mansion. Rose quartz arches, dancing water fountains, gardens with thousands of white roses and purple wisteria. Over 500 guests had arrived. Businessmen, politicians, celebrities, and, of course, some questionable characters from Robert's world. The ceremony was beautiful. Alexander, Robert's son, a handsome 28-year-old, married Sophia, an architect from a prestigious family. A string quartet played, tears flowed, love was in the air. But everyone noticed something strange. In the front row, next to Robert and his wife, there was a reserved seat with a golden card that read, "Special Guest." The murmurs began. Who could it be? A surprise celebrity? Some important politician? After the ceremony, during the reception in the mansion's main ballroom, Robert took the microphone. The room fell into absolute silence. 1,000 candles illuminated tables decorated with exotic flower centerpieces. The orchestra stopped its music. "Family, friends, guests," Robert began, his voice sounding firm but loaded with emotion. "Before we continue this celebration, I want to introduce you to someone very special." He gave a signal and the ballroom doors opened. Dorothy entered, supported by the arm of one of Robert's trusted bodyguards. She walked with dignity, her wine-red dress contrasting beautifully with the white and gold decoration. The silence became sepulchral. No one understood what was happening. Dorothy walked down the center aisle as hundreds of eyes followed her. Her heart beat so hard she thought she would faint, but Robert's encouraging smile at the end of the path gave her strength. Robert helped Dorothy up to the small stage where the microphone was. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Robert, his voice now breaking, "I want to introduce you to Mrs. Dorothy Williams, the woman who saved my life." The murmurs started again. People looked at each other, confused. Robert continued, now unable to hold back tears. 50 years ago, when I was an abandoned child dying of hunger under a bridge, this woman, this angel, took me in. She, who barely had enough to eat, shared her food with me. She gave me her roof. She taught me to read. She showed me what a mother's love was. The room was completely silent. Some women already had tears in their eyes. "Without Mrs. Dorothy, I wouldn't be here today." Robert looked at his son Alexander. "And my son wouldn't have gotten married today. And none of you would be celebrating in this mansion, because I wouldn't exist." Robert took Dorothy's trembling hand. "For 50 years I searched for her. And last week I found her, living on the streets of Brooklyn. The woman who gave me everything when she had nothing was sleeping on cardboard." A collective sob ran through the room. Many guests were now openly crying. "Mrs. Dorothy," Robert knelt before her, to the astonished gaze of everyone, "I owe you my life, and I will never, never be able to repay what you did for me. But today, before my family, my friends, and my son on the most important day of his life, I want to honor you." He stood up and announced, "From today, Mrs. Dorothy will live in a house I've purchased in her name, here in the Hamptons. She will have everything she needs for the rest of her life. Medical care, comfort, dignity, and most importantly—" Robert signaled and his wife Maria came up on stage with a legal folder. "I've modified my will. Mrs. Dorothy will be treated as my biological mother in all legal documents. She will inherit part of my estate, just like my children. Because that's what she is, my mother." The room exploded in deafening applause. All 500 guests stood up, applauding with tears running down their faces. The groom, Alexander, came up on stage and hugged Dorothy. "Thank you, Grandma Dorothy," he whispered to her, "for giving me my father." Dorothy, overwhelmed, could barely speak. Finally she found her voice. I only did what any person with a heart would have done," she said in a trembling voice. "That boy needed help, and I had 2 hands and a heart. I didn't know that simple act would change my life 50 years later." Robert hugged her tightly as photographers captured the moment. "You taught me that true wealth isn't in money, but in humanity," Robert said into the microphone. "And today, on my son's wedding day, I want everyone to remember this. A simple act of kindness can change the course of an entire life." The party continued until dawn. Dorothy danced with Robert to the sound of the string quartet. Guests lined up to greet her, hug her, and some even apologize for all the times they had ignored homeless people on the streets. The story went viral within hours. Videos of Robert's speech and his embrace with Dorothy were shared millions of times on social media. The Mafia boss invited a homeless woman to his son's wedding, and what he did left everyone in shock, became the most shared headline of the year in America. But beyond social media and viral fame, something deeper happened. In New York, dozens of people began approaching homeless individuals, offering help. Local businessmen, inspired by Robert, created a fund to build dignified shelters. Dorothy, who now lived in a beautiful colonial house near the beach, dedicated the rest of her days to helping other homeless people, giving them the same opportunity she had given Robert decades earlier. 3 years after the wedding, Robert organized a family dinner at his Hampton estate. At the head of the table sat Mrs. Dorothy, surrounded by Robert, Maria, Alexander, Sophia, and the 2 newborn grandchildren Dorothy adored. "Mrs. Dorothy," said Alexander, raising his glass, "my children will carry your last name as their middle name, Williams. So they never forget the lesson you taught us, that kindness is the only inheritance truly worth leaving." Dorothy, now 61 but looking rejuvenated and happy, raised her glass with tears in her eyes. "I only gave love when someone needed it," she said softly. "I never expected anything in return. But life has mysterious ways of returning what we give." Robert took her hand. "And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you're never alone again." They toasted under the starry sky of the Hamptons, while the string quartet played Moon River in the distance. Because in the end, this wasn't just the story of a mafia boss who honored a debt of gratitude. It was the story of how a simple act of kindness created a legacy that would change generations. Never underestimate the power of an act of kindness. You never know who you're helping today, and who might change your life tomorrow. The woman sleeping on the street might have saved the life of a future millionaire. The child you feed today might be the one who takes care of you tomorrow. Treat every person with dignity, because in every invisible face there's a story waiting to be honored. Mobile phone, did this story touch your heart? Share it and remember, kindness always comes back. If you made it this far, thank you so much for staying. A like helps more than you think. YouTube is weird like that. And if you enjoy this type of content, you know where to find me every week. See you soon. Handshake.